So I am a People Experience Insights Partner, long title, but essentially I work on the diagnostic side of things. So we look at the data that we have either in-house or data that we collect proactively to understand the employee experience sort of from the whole employee life cycle. So that can be kind of on the spectrum of anything from looking at psychological risk and really looking down that side of things to understand where are the potential hazards within the organization, to really looking at the other side of things. So we could be looking at the data to understand how our high performance individuals are thriving. And it's really project based, so it can be kind of anything within that spectrum. But our core responsibilities is understanding the diagnostic side of it and then coming up with some suggested initiatives. And then we really hand that over to the implementation team. So we're on that front end of the process.
Right, that sounds very interesting because when I do I'm at uni, so I'm Canva presentations. So how do you connect this with Canva? Can you give me an example of this kind of work, specific example of how I can connect it with okay, Canva, you do this. You know what I mean? I'm not able to connect.
So, I guess for the context of Canva, so we are a visual design company, and we have around 5,000 employees now. So what we do in our team is we help the employee experience within those 5,000 employees. So a lot of those are engineers who are actually designing the tools that you might use when you're looking at the presentations and the decks. Our focus is really making sure that those engineers and everyone else around them feel really supported, happy, included, engaged. And so when we're talking about the diagnostics and the data of that side of things, it's really led from, I suppose, regardless of our product, looking at our people within the organization and understanding their experience.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. Is it user experience within the employees? Is it related to UX?
It's not. No. So it's kind of completely removed almost from that. So my role could be in any company in the sense. So really, it's looking at the employee experience, kind of regardless. It just happens that they are specialists in all of the tech. I am certainly not. I am certainly not a specialist in tech. So our role is supporting the employee experience.
So what's a typical day look like for you at work?
So this is a really hard question because I work project-based. So my day varies so much. So it means my subject matter can change quite a lot. But in general, what I'll be looking at is gathering and collecting insights. So that can be through content analysis of information that we already have in-house, or proactively gathering new data through stuff like interviews and focus groups. We will gather the insights and then we will run a lot of analysis, so quantitative and qualitative analysis, to try and get an understanding of the root cause of some of the interest areas that we might be looking at. Once we identify an opportunity, my role will be in the day, I suppose, we'll be creating a brief for our seniors to say, I think we need to tackle this area of the business, and really explaining why. So using psychological frameworks to explain the importance of these areas of risk or flourish that I might see. And then from there, it's actually running the analysis. So I spend a lot of my time in the data, so running analysis on the insights that we have through. Can be the data that we already have, or it might be getting new data. So it might be looking at running interviews, focus groups, new surveys, anything like that. And then once we've done the analysis, it's spending the time actually going through and looking at the research. So I'll actually go into psychological research at this point to understand what is the current market saying about those areas and those gaps, and what initiatives could we try in Canva. And then I'll put that together in a brief, and then I will sit with the relevant teams and brief them on what we've learned and what we find, and talk them through some of the opportunities that I would recommend, and then I essentially hand that over to them. Once they have gone through the implementation process, we also support with checking the success of these initiatives by going through and remeasuring some of the data that we collected early on to see how effective it's been.
Yeah, that was a really good description. Now I understood. That makes sense. But the one thing that I picked up was you need to know your stats.
Actually, interestingly, I am awful at stats. I hate stats. And I hate to say that because obviously I know the importance of it. So I don't have to get super involved in the statistical element of it. There are so many platforms available these days that can support you, and different tools and different experts in the field, that I think as long as you understand the philosophies behind it, so I think you do need to have a good understanding of the theories around stats, but the actual running of the statistical models, that is something that I definitely leverage the tools around me for.
When did you first know you wanted to work in organizational psychology?
So I did my undergrad in psychology in the UK, and the way that the program works in England is that you specialize in different modules each semester, and one of the modules I specialized in was organizational psychology in my third year, and I was just fascinated from that point. I really enjoyed the concepts around that larger scale psychology, really looking at it at a systems level and in that dynamic space of balancing an organization with individual psychology. So pretty early on for me.
Yeah, I guess that's a lot of us because like that was the same experience with me because I took an elective in HRM and also organizational behavior. Though it wasn't organizational psychology per se, but it was like an intersection, macro theory something. So I was like, wow, this is interesting, and this is also like you can do so much with it.
Yeah.
So
it's so diverse.
Yeah, it is. So tell us about your journey to the current job.
Okay, it's quite a long journey, so have to bear with me. But so I did my undergrad in psychology in England. At that point, I knew I was going to move around a bit, so it didn't make sense to do a master's in org psych at that point. So instead, I did a master's in HR while I was in the UK, straight after my undergrad. I moved straight from the UK to the States, where I worked in New York. I took a role as a recruiter for about 2 years in New York. And then I moved over to Australia in a similar function. So I was working in recruitment in Australia for about 6 months before I moved in-house. And so I then took a role in a recruitment company, but as the HR specialist. It was somewhat of a startup. So they had their headquarters were in the US and they had a branch in Australia. But it meant that I got to do the full spectrum of the people role because I was the only HR person within that space. I was there for about 4 years, then COVID hit. I felt like I wanted to do something that was a little bit more giving back to the world, and I took a contract role in a not-for-profit. I worked in that role for about a year, and that was really focusing in change management and organizational development. And while I was in that role, I was working with some org psychs, and it reinvigorated that interest for me. I'd been in Australia by that point for 5 or 6 years, and I thought, like, actually now I'm settled, like this is the time to go back and really pursue that as a specific thing rather than leveraging psychology and HR. I wanted it to be org psych. So then I came to Macquarie and I did my master's in org psych. And then I got the job at Canva, so I went straight from there to Canva.
What's the story behind how you landed this job?
So I wanted to be really strategic about how I was using my placements. Because I did have some experience coming in here, I wanted to build on that and make sure I was maximizing opportunities that maybe I wouldn't get if I was just contracting or if I was taking a normal job. So I kind of mapped it out at the very beginning of my program. I was like, I want to do something in a big bank, I want to do something in consultancy, and I want to do something, and then from there I want to really identify where is my goal and then take a job, like try and pursue that. So I sort of reverse engineered what my big interests were, what were the different organizations that aligned with that, and I spent some time mapping it out, and in the end I was like, okay, Canva and people experience in the data side of things, that's what I want. So once I had made it really clear what I wanted, and I'd done all of my placements, this was coming up to my last placement, so I went to LinkedIn and I looked at who is working in LinkedIn that is an org psych that I could maybe get myself in front of, as well as if there's anyone who I have some mutual connections with. I found a person called Amber who was the head of the people experience space, and we had a mutual connection. I got in contact with the mutual connection and I was like, I need you to get me in front of this person. Like, I really want to just be able to just speak to them. I just want to understand their role. So I got introduced via a LinkedIn connection, and I reached out to Amber, and she was like, there is no placements here, like this is just not a go. So I said, that's completely fair, but can I just have a conversation? Like, I'd love to just learn about your role and learn about like how you got to where you are. And so she was happy to do that. So during that introduction, kind of towards the end of it, I talked to her about the placement experience and what that looks like, and repositioned maybe the idea of me going in there for a placement again. And I was able to convince her at that point that it might be a good idea to let me in just for a few weeks. So she took me on for a 12-week placement. And on my first day, she was like, just to be clear, there's no jobs out of this. And I was like, okay, got to understand. But I just worked like crazy over those 3 months. I really aligned myself to the business. I tried to, knowing that I might not get a job, but really just tried to like align myself and understand the organization and learn as much as I could, network as much as I could. And at the end of that placement, I put forward a proposition to the lead. an unsolicited proposition where I came through with a Canva deck, and I was like, I know you have no interest, but let me just tell you about this. And so I went through where I felt like I could fit and support the organization. So they put me on a contract role at that point. And she was like, fine, I'll put you on for 6 months. And then after that 6 months, I came back in with another presentation about where I think I could add value in the long term. And thankfully she agreed, and she took me on full time at that point.
Well, I'm really motivated after this. I'm going to go and map out my place today.
It's a lot of door knocking, yeah.
Yeah, but that's really strategic, and the fact that you created your own opportunity.
It's one of the benefits, I think, of having worked in recruitment at the beginning of my career, actually. It seems like, recruitment, that's like such a step away from HR, but it's like, actually, it is an area that really sets you up for your career progression, I think, because you learn some of these techniques.
Yeah. What's something you absolutely love about working in organizational psychology?
I love lots of things about working in this space. I feel really, really fortunate that we get to work in this area. For me, my favorite aspect is the complexity of the space. It's quite unique in the fact that you have so many different stakeholders that you have to manage and so many different expectations. Then overlaying that with psychology and really thinking about it from a psychological lens and being best practice and the research, but having to modify that to fit the organization, because you're never going to be able to do best practice once you're actually going live. So how do you tweak that? And then also aligning to your role as a psychologist, like where is my position in this and how do I align that to my ethics? So I think the complexities of it just create such interesting work, and it just keeps it so dynamic and intellectually stimulating. So I find that element of it so engaging.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because it's the challenging the right amount, and the fact that you bring in your psychology at the workplace, because like you said, it's a little hard to manage the expectations of the stakeholders, because sometimes they don't understand that we need to follow this ethics or any of the psychological principles. So yeah, it's your position to convince them.
Definitely.
And how you bring value to what you've been doing, really good, I feel.
I hope so.
What is your best career advice for current psychology students?
The best advice I think that I would give to students is be really positioned in what you want. Do the mapping out of the organization or the market or your own interests. Consider the aspects, Orgpsych can take you so many different directions, but really trying to be considered about what it is you want to achieve. And then I would suggest mapping backwards from that. What are the steps you need to take today to get you to where you want to be long term? Be assertive, go out, connect. Don't be afraid to knock on doors and be really in charge of your own career. I think that there is a tendency to kind of take every step at a time, and I think that there is value in that. I see that you've got to be able to adapt. But if you know your end goal and you can work backwards from that and say, right, what is the next step I need to do to get to that end goal, rather than just what is my next step, I think that can be really helpful in making sure that you have a well thought out long career path.